Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here to give you guys my Fear the Walking Dead Season 2, Episode 6 review, and this episode is called Sicut Cervus. I think that's how you say that, but the name of it's in the title, so you can just find out that way. And this episode came out on May 15th, 2016, and I thought this episode was really damn. I thought this has actually been the best episode of the whole series. And this time I mean it. This one actually was the best episode of the whole show. Definitely got to be one of the best. But let's talk about this episode. I kind of find it ironic though that I was just gonna say in the last review I talked about how Fear the Walking Dead needed that spark. It really needed to you know get better. That it needed something. And this episode it gave us that something. So let's just start off by talking about this episode. Now, I'm going to kind of take a different approach than I normally have with these reviews. I usually say that I will break down the episode separately, because normally it makes the review sloppy. But the review starts out like with one big story. It doesn't really go into like separate storylines until midway through the episode. So, and I kind of like that sometimes too. And I'm gonna give that an up just to start it right off. I kind of like how they started out with everybody being like a big story, and that big story kind of led to smaller storylines. I thought that was awesome actually. But let's talk about this episode. So this episode started off with Travis talking to Nick about him killing the prisoner in the last episode, and everybody just kind of thought he was malicious by doing that. He was unhinged by doing that, and he brings up that Madison didn't believe him, and he said, but then Madison said that he did believe me, that she did believe me. So that kind of I thought was a nice little plot hole to kind of set up what was to come later on in the story. So then what happens is Madison, Madison, Daniel, Madison, Daniel, and Lewis see the contact that they have to go through, and there was supposed to only be one of them that was coming, but then we found out that there was a couple of them, so they ended up having. So all the whole group ended up having to hide, and I kind of like the way that this story was set up because I liked how in this storyline, well, I should say not this storyline, but this scene where you couldn't necessarily see what was happening, but you could kind of hear what was happening, and I liked it. Daniel was kind of saying, how they were going to give away the money, but they wanted to check to make sure nobody was on board the boat and stuff like that. And then we heard gunshots going off, and when the group goes up, when the boat starts going and the group goes upstairs, we find out that Lewis had been killed by these guys. So Daniel goes over to put each and every one of them down, but before he puts Lewis down, Lewis wants Daniel and Ophelia to give him to give his mother this coin, and instead Daniel just flicks it right off the boat right into the water, which I thought was hilarious, and I thought it was funny. But then when they finally board the ship, when they finally board on land, everybody finally makes it to Mexico. Now I have to mention what happened in the first scene before I get to that. But everything leading up to this, I thought this was done well. This will get enough. But yeah, pretty much what happened was we saw people in a church. And I like the way this scene was done, because I always kind of wondered when you watch a zombie apocalypse type of show, if people would kind of start to second question if there is a God, or kind of start to question their belief, knowing that God's sending all these, sending all these demons and stuff to go after them, or in this case, zombies. And the priest was talking about how maybe this isn't God's work, maybe this is some other evil creature, making us question our faith in God and making us do bad things. So we find out pretty much that they would receive communion, and I did kind of like how when they would say feed, they would show the people eating communion. I thought that was kind of a clever um, thing the producer did. And um, what was his name? Something Thomas Abigail comes up, and he wants this to stop because pretty much we find out that they've been using the dead to fight the dead. But really, that's not a good thing because you're just adding more to the problem. And we find out that there was poison in the communion, and everybody ends up dying. So then we don't really see anything else what happens with that. So this was kind of the aftermath of that. We see the whole group. So I thought the opening scene was done very well too. I'm going to give that an up. So the group comes over, and Strand sees Thomas's truck and gets instantly worried, thinking that he's become infected. And um, then they see the infected, all the other group, and they grab weapons and just start killing them. A couple of noteworthy scenes that came from this is when Daniel went to kill a kid that was infected. He was hesitated a lot, and he didn't really want to do it. He kind of saw him as if he wasn't infected. I kind of like that scene a lot. That scene will get an up. I'll just give this whole scene an up instead of just giving individual ups. But the biggest story that came out of this is Madison gets taken down by one of the infected, and Chris has an opportunity to do something, and he doesn't do anything. He just stands there in a daze, and Alicia's like, Chris, what the fuck? So then she has to step in and save Madison. And this obviously was a plot hole that was leading into future stories. And Thomas gets upset. Not Thomas. I'm sorry. Strand gets upset when he doesn't see Thomas. So the group drives to Strand's mother's house, who we find out lives in like a who we find out lives in a community pretty much. I forget where it is. That's a compound. Um, And I did like the drive to the compound because it kind of showed the beautiful natures of Mexico. And I thought that was kind of done really nice because in a zombie apocalyptic type of world, you would appreciate that type of stuff a lot more. So I thought that scene was done really well. So I'm going to give that scene an up too. So the group arrives and they have to give up their weapons. Daniel doesn't really want to give up his weapon because he's second guessing it, but he ends up reluctantly giving it up. And I don't mean giving it up like like the up down method I do on this channel. I mean like he had to relinquish his weapon. Um, and yeah, what else was I gonna say? So Strand tells Lewis's mother, who not Lewis's mother, but um, Strand tells Celia, which is yeah. Strand tells Celia, who knows Lewis, that he ended up what happened to Lewis. I forget exactly like how Lewis and Thomas were related with each other. I kind of didn't. The show really didn't explain that. I don't know if they were brothers or what, but because I know Lewis. What I know, Celio is. I'm gonna make sure I get that right. That name right. Yeah, Celio is Thomas's mom. But we find out that when Strand goes to see Thomas, we find out that he's been bit or scratched by the infected. I'm just going to assume bit because it seems like they don't be infected when you watch this show, and then when you watch The Walking Dead, it seems like they're more the infected slash walkers are more bit than bite than more than anything else. Um, but I forget what I was gonna say. Oh, but we find out, yeah, he's been bit, which was kind of sad, because I kind of liked to see these characters with each other, and I did like that they did the callback to their scene in episode 5 when Strand helped him to his bed. I thought that was a nice callback. So this is kind of when the storylines start to become separated. So I'm just going to kind of talk about the storyline separately. So I'm just going to start off by just talking about certain ones. Nick and Celia are kind of starting to get along, and Nick's kind of being his typical self where he kind of kisses up to the host of the house, and Nick is just doesn't really like the fact that he has to kill the dead anymore. He's just think it's starting to be too much for him. So Celia kind of brings up that the dead's always been around, we just never really been around to see them. And later on, what happens is then Nick, since Celia doesn't really think that they're dead, Nick wants to know what she thinks they are, and we don't really see any more of that. I don't know if they're going to revisit that in the next episode or what, but that's just me. So I do kind of like the scene too when Madison still kind of like doesn't trust Nick and stuff, still thinks he has problems, and I think that kind of starts. You can kind of start to see that with like every episode. And I have a feeling that will slowly start to change. They're going to develop some sort of relationship, and I kind of hope that starts to happen. So I like this scene too. This scene will get it up as well. And then what happens is Daniel starts to get very suspicious of Celia. I liked Daniel in this episode a lot. I thought he showed some nice mercy. Like, he just kind of seemed like he was off in a daze, and you could kind of see that he's starting to lose grip without his wife around. And Ophelia prayed, and I liked how when she took Nick to pray, Nick wasn't thinking about that. He had flashbacks from the first episode when he originally saw the outbreak go on and stuff like that. And then, and like she was trying to be all peaceful and stuff like that because she was praying for her mother. So I thought that was really well done. And then, but then Daniel sees this kid talking to somebody, and well, he sees the kid feed a dog, like slip a dog through like the compound or something. And when Daniel sees a kid talking to his mother, and Daniel wants to meet the mother. And when he goes in there, we see that the infected are trapped into the in the compound. This was a callback, pretty much, from season 2 of The Walking Dead. They kind of just took this storyline and put it here, where they pretty much Herschel. This is the exact same thing when Herschel locked all the walkers up in his bone. So I'm assuming, yeah, that this was the same thing. I kind of like the callback, but it just kind of is a little bit lazy writing because I feel like this show should be different. But whatever. So I'll give this scene a down just because of that, because I kind of would like to see new stuff, not really anything done from The Walking Dead. I'm okay with the guts being done because that makes sense, but I don't really like the fact that they took that storyline and just put it here. So I didn't like that. But then Daniel goes to confront Celia about it, and Celia kind of has the same reaction to it as Herschel did, where they're just infected, and she talks about how she doesn't think that they're dead, and Daniel finds out that they poisoned him, and then she starts to ask Daniel if he's afraid of death, and I like that scene a lot. And then, so I liked this storyline. I thought it was good. And then the two main storylines that kind of took place throughout this episode, I loved the storyline they did with Alicia and Chris. Pretty much, Alicia was watching TV, watching an old movie, and I do kind of like that Alicia starts to kind of become appreciative of TV because it's like an everyday thing she can't really do anymore. And Alicia confronts Chris about almost leaving her mom for dead, and Chris just pretty much said that he just froze. But Alicia ain't buying it, and Chris doesn't want Alicia to tell anybody about it, and because he wants to keep the family together. So Alicia kind of questions it, and then what happens is her mom, I don't know why the fuck, Madison comes in, and they have like a conversation that's just breaking the ice. And I kind of like the way they did it, where we didn't actually see Alicia tell him. We kind of had to use our sense of imagination. And Madison confronts Travis about it, and they pretty much talk about how Chris is sick and something needs to be done about it. So Travis says, "Well, we can help Chris," and Madison doesn't think there's anything they can do to help um, Chris. And Madison and Travis kind of have like a fight on what they should help, on the way they should help Chris. Travis kind of brings Nick into it, talking about how he was always there helping out Nick. And I kind of like this, that this family's kind of starting to fall apart a little bit because of this zombie apocalypse. You could make the argument, though, that the zombie apocalypse, um, you know, before they were in the zombie apocalypse, that it didn't really, that their family wasn't really at whole anyways, but you can kind of see Madison and Travis's marriage was the one thing that was kind of locked, and now you can kind of see that that's starting to become even kind of fragile now. And I did like the scene when Madison called Alicia her daughter. She didn't call her their daughter, it was her daughter. So I like that quote too. So they revisit that later, and Strand is upset with that pretty much Thomas is about to die, and Thomas gets told to go to sleep because he just wants the hurt of this world to be, put out of Thomas's misery. He even says that Thomas didn't want to be a part of this world, and Thomas says he doesn't want to leave Strand. So Strand says, "What if I went with you?" So he pretty much references that he's going to kill himself, and they'll both go out together. So Cecilia brings in the body of Christ, so that way he can take it and kill himself. And I did like that Celia finally got the sense of approval with Strand, because finally she finally gave her his condolences, because obviously Cecilia didn't like Strand in the beginning of the show, and now she's warmed up to him. And I liked that. And I like the way the writers really set this up, where we were supposed to have thought that Strand was going to end up taking the body of Christ. And I like the way they set this up. And then what happens is Chris, as this is happening, sneaks out of the room in the middle of the night and goes into the room where Madison and Alicia were sleeping. And he gets a knife, and before he can do anything about it, we hear a gunshot go off, and this wakes up Madison and Alicia, and they tell Chris, like, "What the hell are you doing in here?" And this chases Chris off. He ends up running away, and then the last thing we see is Strand ended up shooting Thomas, so that way he wouldn't turn into the infected. And that was pretty much the end of the episode, and then that was that. And all this stuff gets up. I thought it was done very well. I liked the way it was done, and it was just fantastic. As for the rating for this episode, it was actually fantastic. I thought this episode was done really well, and I really, 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 really hope that this means that this show can finally get into motion. Because I thought it was finally about to, in episode 5, but then episode 6 happened. I hope the mid-season finale really blows me away and really knocks, this show out of the park. This episode I thought was fantastic, and I kind of can't wait to see what it leads to the next episode. So if I had to rate this episode, I'm going to give it an A-. I thought it was a fantastic episode of Fear the Walking Dead, and I really enjoyed it. So that's just my thoughts there. And overall, it got some pretty well-received reviews. The critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it an 85% approval rating. And on IMDb, it did a 7.2. People gave it an 8, a 7. Somebody gave it a 5. See, the thing is with IBM, though, is it's, IDMB, I'm sorry. There's only like 3 reviews of this, so that 5 probably brought that show down a lot of ratings, so yeah. But overall, I gotta give this episode an A-. I thought it was done really well. And that's pretty much the end of this episode, or the end of this review, I should say. So thank you guys for watching this video. Please make sure you guys leave your comments and thoughts on what you guys thought of this episode. I should have said thoughts in the same sentence, but I did it anyways. And make sure you guys subscribe to this channel for more content and click on the bell. So that way, every time I upload a video, you guys will get the notifications for it. Make sure you guys do the same thing for my CM brothers. And that's the only channel I have to promote. But that's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.